The stars had always looked peaceful from Earth. People gazed up at the night sky and dreamed of what might be out there. For decades, humanity had wondered if they were alone in the universe. Then one day they got their answer. They were not alone, and not everyone out there was friendly. The Krell Empire had been watching Earth for many years. They were an old race, ancient by human standards. Their empire stretched across 17 star systems. Everywhere they went, they conquered. Everywhere they went, they took what they wanted. They had crushed many civilizations before. Now they had decided it was humanity's turn. Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his ship, the USS Defiant. He was an admiral now, the highest rank in Earth's defense fleet. His hair had turned gray over the years, and his face showed the weight of responsibility. Today that weight felt heavier than ever. The Krell were coming and everyone knew it. 6 months ago the Krell had sent their message. It was broadcast on every frequency, visible on every screen across human space. Their leader, a massive reptilian creature named Warlord Thaxkor, had made their intentions clear. Surrender or die. Those were the only choices they offered. The message had shown images of other worlds the Krell had conquered. Cities burning, populations enslaved, resources stripped away until nothing remained. The Krell did not just defeat their enemies. They destroyed them completely. They wanted humanity to know what was coming. They wanted humanity to be afraid. But fear was not what the Krell got. Humanity had spent thousands of years fighting wars. Every generation had known conflict. Every century had brought new weapons, new tactics, new ways to survive against impossible odds. The Krell thought humanity was young and weak. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Jake looked at the display screen in front of him. It showed the positions of human ships throughout the solar system. There were hundreds of them. Some were military warships built for battle. Others were civilian vessels that had been modified and armed. Mining ships carried missiles now. Transport vessels had railguns attached to their hulls. Even small personal craft had been turned into fighters. Kate Palmer, his communications officer, turned to face him. She was young, maybe 30 years old, with sharp eyes and steady hands. She had volunteered for this mission knowing she might not survive it. So had everyone else on the ship. "Admiral, we're receiving the Krell transmission again," Kate said. "They want to broadcast one final message before they arrive." Jake nodded. "Put it on screen. Let everyone hear what they have to say." The screen changed, showing Warlord Thaxkor's face. His scales were dark green, almost black in places. His eyes were golden and cold. When he spoke, his voice was deep and filled with certainty. He believed every word he said. "Humans, your time has ended before it truly began. We have conquered 17 star systems. We have defeated civilizations that had explored the galaxy for thousands of years before your ancestors learned to make fire. Your weapons are primitive. Your ships are slow. Your numbers mean nothing. We will sweep through your system like a storm. Surrender now, and some of you may live as slaves. Resist, and we will destroy every world you call home. Every man, woman, and child will perish. This is your final warning. Choose wisely." The transmission ended. Silence filled the bridge for a moment. Then Jake stood up from his command chair. He walked to the center of the bridge, looking at his crew. Each of them was watching him, waiting to see what he would do. "Kate," he said quietly, "open a channel. All frequencies. I want the Krell to hear this. I want everyone to hear this." Kate's fingers moved across her controls. "Channel open, sir. You're broadcasting to everyone." Jake looked directly at the camera. His face was calm, but his eyes burned with determination. When he spoke, his voice was steady and clear. "Warlord Thaxkor, this is Admiral Jake Morrison of the United Earth Defense Fleet. We have received your message. We have heard your threats, and we have only one response to give you." He paused, letting the moment stretch. "Come and take it." The transmission cut. Those 3 words echoed across human space. They were old words spoken by humans throughout history who refused to surrender. They had been said by soldiers facing overwhelming odds. They had been said by defenders who chose to fight rather than submit. Now they were said to an alien empire that thought humanity would be easy to conquer. On Earth, people watched the exchange. In the colonies on Mars and the moons of Jupiter, families gathered around screens. On space stations and orbital platforms, workers stopped what they were doing to listen. Everyone understood what those words meant. Humanity was going to fight. Henry Blake sat in the command center of the Salvation, an orbital defense platform near Mars. He was older than most of the crew, almost 50, with gray hair and a weathered face. He had been a soldier his whole life, fighting in Earth's last major wars before humanity had united under one government. Now he was fighting for something bigger than any single nation. He was fighting for the entire human race, Commander, one of his officers called out. We're detecting movement throughout the system. Civilian ships are moving into position. They're joining the defense grid. Henry watched his screens as hundreds of new signals appeared. These were not warships. These were the miners who worked the asteroid belt, the traders who carried goods between colonies, the explorers who mapped the outer system, the families who lived on distant stations. Every human who could fly had answered the call. Each ship had been modified over the past 6 months. Mining lasers had been recalibrated to cut through armor. Cargo holds had been filled with missiles. Engine systems had been upgraded for combat maneuvers. The Krell expected to face a small military force. Instead, they would face an entire civilization that had turned itself into a weapon. How long until they arrive? Henry asked. 6 hours, sir. They'll emerge from hyperspace at the edge of the system, probably near Neptune's orbit. Henry nodded. 6 hours. That was all the time they had left to prepare. All the time left before the largest battle in human history would begin. He thought about his family back on Earth, his wife and his daughter. He had said goodbye to them 3 days ago, knowing he might never see them again. But he also knew that if humanity lost this battle, they would die anyway. Everyone would. All stations, this is Commander Blake, he said into his communicator. Begin final preparations. Check all weapon systems. Verify all ammunition loads. Make sure every missile is ready to launch. This is not a drill. The enemy is coming, and when they get here, we're going to show them what happens when you threaten humanity. Across the solar system, similar preparations were happening. On every ship, every station, every platform, humans were getting ready. They checked their weapons. They ran system diagnostics. They said quiet prayers and made private promises. Some were afraid. Most were determined. All of them were ready to fight. The Krell had made a fundamental mistake. They had looked at humanity's short time in space and assumed that meant weakness. They had seen Earth's simple technology and thought it was primitive. They had counted human ships and decided the numbers were too small to matter. But they had not understood the most important thing about humanity. Humans were survivors. Humans were fighters. And when humans were threatened, they became the most dangerous creatures in the galaxy. The countdown had begun. In 6 hours, the Krell Armada would arrive. In 6 hours, they would learn their mistake. In 6 hours, the galaxy would discover that humanity was not prey. Humanity was not weak. Humanity was not going to surrender. And anyone who thought otherwise was about to face the full fury of a species that had spent its entire existence learning how to wage war. The Krell Armada emerged from hyperspace exactly when they said they would. 300 warships appeared at the edge of the solar system, their hulls gleaming in the distant light of the sun. Each ship was massive, built for war and conquest. They had shields that could stop most weapons. They had plasma cannons that could burn through solid metal. They had armor that had survived centuries of battles across the galaxy. Warlord Thaxkor stood in his command chamber on the flagship. Around him, displays showed every ship in his fleet. They were arranged in perfect formation, a wall of military power that had never been defeated. He felt confident. More than confident, he felt certain of victory. Send forward scouts, he ordered his officers. I want to see what these humans have prepared. Not that it will matter. We could conquer this system with half our fleet. The Krell officers shared their leader's confidence. They had good reason to. The Krell had never lost a major battle. Every species they had encountered had either surrendered quickly or been crushed slowly. Their military doctrine had been refined over centuries. Their tactics had been proven time and time again. Humanity would be no different from all the others. The scout ships moved ahead of the main fleet. Their sensors reached out, scanning the solar system for human defenses. What they found confused them. The readings showed hundreds of ships scattered throughout the system, but most of them were not military vessels. They detected mining ships, transport vessels, even small personal craft. It looked like the humans were hiding behind their civilians. Pathetic, one Krell officer said, his voice filled with disgust. They put their civilians in front of their military. They hope we will hesitate to fire on non-combatants. Thaxkor laughed, a harsh sound that echoed through the command chamber. These humans understand nothing of war. They think we care about their civilians. They think we have mercy. They will learn their error. Signal the fleet. We advance in standard formation. Destroy anything that does not surrender immediately. The Krell fleet moved forward. They maintained their traditional battle formation, a proven strategy that had worked in 17 conquests. Their shields were at maximum power. Their weapons were charged and ready. They expected the humans to either run or make a desperate, futile attack. What they did not expect was what actually happened. As the Krell fleet crossed Neptune's orbit, a small mining ship called the Lucky Strike suddenly accelerated toward them. The Krell sensors identified it as a civilian vessel. They assumed it was either trying to escape or making a suicide run with some kind of primitive bomb. Destroy it, Thaxcor ordered without concern. 3 Krell destroyers fired their plasma weapons. The bright beams lanced through space toward the small human ship. They struck the mining vessel's hull, and for a moment the Krell thought it would explode. Instead, something unexpected happened. The Lucky Strike's surface lit up with hundreds of small laser turrets. These were point defense weapons designed to shoot down incoming missiles. They fired at the Krell destroyers, dozens of laser beams striking their shields. The damage was minimal, but it was not what the Krell expected from a mining ship. Then the cargo bay doors opened. Inside the mining ship, where ore should have been stored, there were missile pods. Dozens of them. They launched all at once, filling space with speeding warheads. Lisa Grant sat in the pilot seat of the Lucky Strike, watching her screens as the missiles launched. She had been a miner for 15 years, hauling rocks from the asteroid belt to processing stations. Now she was a soldier and her ship was a weapon. She smiled grimly as her escape pod ejected from the doomed vessel. The missiles were not ordinary explosives. Human engineers had studied every piece of alien technology they could find. These warheads used shaped nuclear charges, designed to focus their energy into narrow, penetrating beams. More importantly, they moved faster than the Krell expected. Much faster. 70 missiles struck the Krell formation. Shields flared bright as they tried to stop the impacts. Some missiles were destroyed. Others were deflected. But many got through. The focused nuclear beams punched through energy shields that should have stopped them. 2 Krell destroyers went dark, their power systems overloaded. A third ship began leaking atmosphere from multiple hull breaches. On the Krell flagship, alarms sounded. Officers stared at their displays in shock. One mining ship had just damaged 3 destroyers. That should have been impossible. That was a civilian vessel? Thaxcor demanded. Yes, Warlord, the tactical officer replied, his voice uncertain. But it was heavily modified. And our sensors are detecting similar modifications on hundreds of other ships throughout the system. For the first time, Thaxcor felt something unfamiliar. Not quite fear, but something close to it, concern, doubt. He pushed the feeling away. 3 damaged ships meant nothing. He still had overwhelming superiority. Increase speed. Signal all ships to go to maximum alert. These humans are more clever than expected, but they are still primitives. We will crush them. The Krell fleet surged forward, moving deeper into the solar system. They passed Uranus, then approached Saturn. Their sensors showed more human ships ahead, scattered among Saturn's rings. The Krell prepared to engage them, confident that numbers and technology would ensure victory. They were wrong. Rachel Torres sat in the command center of Titan Base, watching her screens with intense focus. She was responsible for coordinating the Saturn defense network. Around the planet's rings, hidden among the ice and rock, were thousands of automated weapons platforms. They had been placed there over the past 6 months, disguised to look like natural debris. All platforms, this is Titan Base, she said into her communicator. Enemy fleet is entering the engagement zone. Prepare to activate on my mark. The Krell fleet moved into Saturn's orbit, their sensors scanning for threats. They detected some weapon platforms among the rings, maybe a few dozen. Their tactical computers calculated that these platforms posed minimal danger. The Krell ships prepared to destroy them as they passed. Mark, Rachel said quietly. What the Krell thought were ice chunks suddenly came alive. Thousands of hidden platforms activated at once. Railgun batteries emerged from concealment. Missile tubes opened. Laser arrays powered up. The Krell had sailed into the middle of the largest weapons network humanity had ever built. The platforms opened fire. Railgun slugs accelerated to tremendous speeds tore through the Krell formation. These were not energy weapons that shields were designed to stop. These were solid projectiles with enormous kinetic energy. The Krell shields tried to deflect them, but the sheer number of impacts overwhelmed their defenses. Krell ships began to take damage, Hull plates shattered, weapon systems exploded, engine sections went dark. The orderly formation broke apart as ships tried to evade the incoming fire. But no matter where they turned, there were more weapons platforms waiting. "Return fire," Thax Corps roared. "Destroy those platforms!" The Krell fleet fought back. Their plasma cannons burned through space, targeting the human weapons platforms. They destroyed dozens of them, then hundreds. But for every platform they eliminated, more revealed themselves. The humans had been patient, building this defense network over many months, hiding it among Saturn's rings where the Krell would not notice until it was too late. Rachel watched her tactical display as the battle raged. Red markers showed Krell ships. Green markers showed her platforms. As she watched, green markers winked out one by one as the Krell destroyed them. But red markers were disappearing even faster. "Target their command ships," she ordered. "Focus fire on the largest vessels. If we can take out their leaders, the rest might break." The weapons platforms adjusted their targeting. Railgun fire concentrated on the larger Krell vessels. Missiles streaked toward the command ships. The Krell flagship shuddered as multiple impacts struck its shields. For the first time in centuries, a Krell warlord's ship was in serious danger. On the Krell flagship, Taxicor gripped his command throne as the ship rocked from impacts. His officers shouted damage reports. Shield strength was dropping. Hull breaches in multiple sections. Casualty reports coming in from throughout the fleet. "Status report," he demanded. "Warlord, we have lost 70 ships. Another 40 are damaged. The humans have more weapons platforms than our scans indicated. Many more, 70 ships. Nearly a quarter of his fleet, lost to what should have been primitive defenses." Thaxcor's mind raced. This was not how the battle was supposed to go. The humans should have been easy prey. Instead, they were fighting with tactics and weapons that seemed far beyond what their young civilization should possess. But he was Krell. His people had conquered the galaxy through strength and determination. He would not be defeated by these upstart humans, no matter how clever they thought they were. "All ships, maximum acceleration. We push through to the inner system. Once we reach Earth, this resistance will collapse. They will surrender when we threaten their homeworld." The Krell fleet broke through the Saturn defense network and accelerated toward Mars and Earth. They left behind destroyed platforms and debris, but they also left behind 30% of their fleet, either destroyed or too damaged to continue. The humans had drawn first blood, and it had been deep. Admiral Jake Morrison watched the tactical display from the bridge of the USS Defiant. The Krell fleet was moving toward the inner solar system, battered but still dangerous. They had lost many ships at Saturn, but they still outnumbered the human military vessels. Now it was time to change that balance. "All ships, this is Admiral Morrison," he said into the fleet-wide channel. "The enemy is approaching Mars. They think they've seen the worst we can offer. They're wrong. Prepare to reveal our main battle fleet. Today we show them what human warships can really do." Throughout the inner solar system, human warships had been hiding. Some were behind Mars and its moons. Others were concealed near the asteroid belt, their power signatures masked by electromagnetic interference. A few had been sitting dormant in orbit around Earth itself, looking like civilian stations. Now they all powered up at once. 200 purpose-built warships appeared on the Krell sensors. These were not converted mining vessels or armed transports. These were ships designed from the beginning for combat. They had thick armor plating. They had multiple weapon systems. They had engines built for speed and maneuverability. Most importantly, they had crews trained specifically for war. Nicole Scott commanded the destroyer USS Vengeance. She was 35 years old, a career military officer who had spent her entire adult life preparing for this moment. Her ship was smaller than many in the fleet, but it was fast and deadly. Every weapon system was charged and ready. Every crew member was at their station. "Weapons officer status report," she said calmly. "All railguns loaded and ready, Captain. Missile tubes are full. Laser batteries at maximum charge. Point defense systems active. We're ready for whatever they throw at us." Nicole nodded. "Good. Target the nearest Krell cruiser. When the Admiral gives the order, I want our first shot to count." The Krell fleet slowed as they detected the human warships. On the flagship, Warlord Thaxcor stared at his tactical display with growing anger. The humans had been hiding their main fleet. They had let him waste ammunition and energy on civilian vessels while keeping their best ships in reserve. It was a clever strategy. He hated that it was working. "How many ships?" he demanded. 200 military vessels, Warlord, all showing significant weapon signatures. These are not modified civilian craft. These are dedicated warships. Thaxcor calculated quickly. He had entered the system with 300 ships. He now had about 200 still combat effective. The humans had 200 fresh warships, plus all their converted civilian vessels still scattered throughout the system. The numbers were suddenly much closer than he liked. All ships, battle formation Delta. Concentrate fire on their largest vessels. We will break their fleet and then move on to Earth. The Krell ships moved into their battle formation, a tried and tested arrangement that maximized their firepower. But as they maneuvered, the human fleet did something the Krell had not expected. They scattered. Human ships broke into small groups moving in different directions at high speed. Some accelerated toward the Krell fleet, others moved to flank positions. A few dropped back, creating multiple firing angles. The humans were not fighting in a traditional formation. They were fighting like wolves hunting prey. "All ships engage at will," Admiral Morrison ordered. "Remember your training. Stay mobile. Use your speed. Don't let them pin you down." The battle began in earnest. Human ships opened fire from multiple directions at once. Railgun slugs streaked through space at incredible speeds. Missiles launched by the hundreds, their engines burning bright as they accelerated toward Krell vessels. Laser beams created a deadly web through the combat zone. The Krell returned fire with their plasma weapons. Bright bolts of superheated matter lanced toward human ships. But the human vessels were moving constantly, rolling and diving and changing direction in ways that made them hard to target. The Krell were used to fighting enemies who stood and traded fire in orderly formations. The humans fought like nothing they had encountered before. Alex Price led a squadron of 20 fighter craft toward the center of the Krell formation. The fighters were small, barely larger than atmospheric aircraft. They were too small for the Krell to consider serious threats. That was their advantage. "Stay tight, everyone," he called to his squadron. "Our job is to harass and distract, hit their sensor arrays, hit their communication nodes, make them pay attention to us so our big ships can get clean shots." The fighters dove into the Krell fleet, moving between the massive warships like insects around elephants. They fired precision missiles at vulnerable points. They used their lasers to blind sensors. They drew fire away from the larger human vessels. The Krell tried to swat them down, but the fighters were too fast and too maneuverable. One Krell battleship focused its point defense weapons on Alex's fighter. Dozens of small plasma bolts filled the space around him. He threw his craft into a spinning dive, the bolts passing within meters of his hull. His heart pounded, but his hands were steady on the controls. "That's right, Ugly," he muttered. "Keep shooting at me. Don't pay attention to the destroyer coming up behind you." The USS Vengeance appeared behind the Krell battleship, its main railgun aimed at the enemy's engine section. Nicole Scott smiled grimly as her targeting computer confirmed lock. "Fire," she said simply. The railgun shot hit the Krell battleship's engines at tremendous velocity. The kinetic energy punched through the armor and into the ship's power core. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the entire rear section of the Krell ship exploded, sending debris in all directions. The battleship went dark and began drifting, powerless and defeated. Similar scenes played out across the battle space. Human ships worked together, using tactics they had practiced for months. Some ships provided covering fire while others maneuvered for killing shots. Fighters distracted large vessels while destroyers and cruisers attacked from blind spots. The humans fought with coordination and precision that the Krell could not match. More importantly, the human ships moved in ways the Krell could not match. Humanity's long history of atmospheric flight had taught them about three-dimensional combat. They understood angles and vectors in a way that species who had gone straight to space travel did not. They rolled their ships to present difficult targeting angles. They used thrusters to make sudden direction changes that threw off enemy aim. They fought like they were still dogfighting in the skies of Earth. Stephen Martinez commanded the heavy cruiser USS Retribution. His ship was one of the largest in the human fleet. nearly as big as a Krell battleship. But where Krell ships were designed to absorb damage and dish it out from fixed positions, the Retribution was designed to move and strike. "Helm, take us through their line," he ordered. "I want to punch right through the middle of their formation. Engineering, divert all power to forward shields. We're going to get close and personal." The Retribution accelerated directly toward the Krell fleet. Plasma fire struck its shields, bright flares of energy that would have destroyed a lesser ship. But the Retribution's shields held, and the big cruiser plowed forward like a battering ram. As it passed through the Krell line, the Retribution fired every weapon it had. Railguns to port and starboard, missiles launching from every tube. Laser batteries creating a sphere of destruction around the ship. 3 Krell vessels took crippling damage in those few seconds. A 4th lost its shields entirely. "That's for everyone you threatened," Steven said quietly, watching the damaged Krell ships fall behind his ship. On the Krell flagship, Warlord Thaxcor watched his fleet being torn apart. His officers shouted reports, but he barely heard them. Ships destroyed, ships disabled, ships retreating. The numbers kept getting worse. How was this happening? The Krell had superior numbers. They had better shields. Their weapons were more advanced. But the humans were winning anyway. They moved faster. They coordinated better. They fought with a ferocity and skill that seemed impossible for such a young species. One of his science officers who had studied human history spoke quietly from his station. "Warlord, I warned you about this. The humans are not like other species. They have spent thousands of years fighting wars. Every generation has known conflict. Every century has produced new weapons and new tactics. They are naturally aggressive and naturally innovative. We should never have attacked them." Thaxcor turned on the officer, rage in his eyes. "Silence, we are Krell, we do not lose to primitives." But even as he said it, another alarm sounded. Another Krell ship destroyed. His fleet was down to less than 150 functional vessels. The humans had lost ships too, but not as many. The battle was turning into a disaster. "Warlord," his tactical officer said urgently, "we must withdraw. If we stay here, we will lose the entire fleet." The words were bitter, but Thaxcor knew they were true. For the first time in 3 centuries, a Krell invasion was failing. For the first time in his life, Warlord Thaxcor had to consider retreat. "Signal all ships," he said, each word painful. "We pull back to the outer system. We need to regroup and call for reinforcements." But as the Krell ships tried to withdraw, they discovered that the humans had planned for this too. Human vessels had been moving throughout the battle, not just to attack, but to cut off escape routes. The Krell were surrounded, trapped in a net they had not seen being laid. The Krell fleet was trapped. What had begun as a conquest had become a fight for survival. Their ships tried to break through the human blockade, but everywhere they turned, human vessels were waiting. The hunters had become the hunted. Warlord Thaxcor stood in his command chamber watching his fleet die. Ship after ship went dark on his tactical display. Some exploded in brilliant flashes. Others simply stopped moving, their crews dead or their systems destroyed. The mighty Krell Armada, which had conquered 17 star systems, was being systematically destroyed by humans. "How many ships do we have left?" he asked, though he feared the answer. 80 ships are still combat effective, Warlord. Another 30 are damaged but functional. The rest are destroyed or disabled. Less than half his fleet remained. In a single day, the humans had accomplished what no other species had managed in 3 centuries. They had broken the Krell. "We need to break through," Thaxcor said. "Concentrate all remaining ships. We punch through their line and retreat to hyperspace. We can return with reinforcements and finish this." But even as he gave the order, he knew it was probably futile. The humans had planned this battle carefully. Every move, every tactic, every weapon placement had been designed to trap and destroy the Krell fleet. They were not fighting like primitives. They were fighting like a civilization that had perfected the art of war over thousands of years. The remaining Krell ships formed up for a final desperate push. They concentrated their formation, bringing all their firepower together. If they could break through at one point, they might escape. It was their last hope. Admiral Morrison saw the Krell maneuver on his tactical display. They were trying to concentrate their forces for a breakthrough. He had expected this. Desperate enemies were predictable enemies. All heavy units moved to intercept the Krell formation. Destroyers and cruisers maintain the perimeter. They're going to try to run. Make sure they don't succeed. The human capital ships moved into position. These were the largest vessels in Earth's fleet. Massive warships that had been designed specifically to face enemy capital ships. They had thick armor, powerful shields, and devastating weapons. Now they would prove their worth. Stephen Martinez positioned the USS Retribution directly in the path of the Krell formation. Around him, 5 other heavy cruisers did the same. They formed a wall of steel and determination that the Krell would have to go through. All weapons target the Krell flagship, Stephen ordered. That's their command ship. If we take it down, the rest might surrender. The Retribution's main railgun was a massive weapon that ran the entire length of the ship. It fired slugs of tungsten alloy at a significant fraction of light speed. Each shot carried enough kinetic energy to punch through almost any armor. The weapon had taken years to develop and required enormous amounts of power to fire. But when it hit, nothing could survive. Main gun charged and ready. Captain, his weapons officer reported. Fire when ready, Stephen said calmly. The railgun fired with a flash of electromagnetic energy. The tungsten slug accelerated down the barrel and into space, moving so fast it was almost impossible to see. It crossed the distance to the Krell flagship in less than a second. The Krell flagship's shields lit up as they tried to stop the impact. For a moment it seemed like they might succeed. The shields were powerful, designed to stop energy weapons and deflect missiles. But they had not been designed to stop a solid projectile moving at such tremendous speed. The slug punched through the shield in 3 milliseconds. It continued through the flagship's outer armor, through multiple internal decks, through structural supports and living spaces, until it reached the command chamber where Warlord Thaxcor stood. In his final moment, Thaxcor understood. The humans were not primitive. They were not weak. They had simply been underestimated. His empire had made the same mistake that countless others had made throughout human history. They had seen youth and inexperience and thought it meant vulnerability. But humanity's youth had been spent learning one lesson over and over: how to survive against superior forces through ingenuity, determination, and ruthless efficiency. The Krell homeworld would receive reports of this battle. Other species would learn what happened here, and they would know that humanity was not to be trifled with. That was Thaxcor's final thought before the railgun slug reached him and everything went dark. The Krell flagship exploded. Its fusion cores breached, creating a brilliant explosion that lit up the battle space. Debris spread in all directions, carrying with it the hopes of Krell conquest. Without their leader, the remaining Krell ships faltered. Some continued fighting, their crews too proud or too afraid to surrender. Others stopped firing and broadcast surrender signals. A few tried to run, only to be intercepted by human ships waiting for exactly that move. Sarah Phillips was a lieutenant commander on the destroyer USS Guardian. Her ship approached a Krell cruiser that had stopped firing and was broadcasting a surrender signal. It was her job to oversee the surrender process and take custody of the enemy crew. "This is the USS Guardian to Krell vessel," she transmitted. "Power down all weapon systems. Prepare to be boarded. Any resistance will be met with immediate destruction. Do you understand?" The Krell response came quickly. "We understand. We surrender. Our weapons are powered down. We will not resist." Sarah felt no joy in the surrender. Too many humans had died today. Good people, brave people, who had given their lives to protect their civilization. But she also felt a grim satisfaction. The Krell had come to conquer and enslave. Instead, they had been defeated and would spend years in prison camps. The battle continued for another hour as the last few Krell ships were either destroyed or surrendered. Finally, Admiral Morrison received the report he had been waiting for. "Admiral, all enemy vessels are either destroyed, disabled, or have surrendered. The battle is over. We've won." Morrison sat back in his command chair. Won. They had actually won. Against overwhelming odds, against an empire that had never been defeated, humanity had emerged victorious. But the cost had been high. "What are our losses?" he asked quietly. 38 warships destroyed, another 47 damaged. Of the converted civilian vessels, we lost 212. Total casualties are still being calculated, but initial estimates are around 12,000 dead, 8,000 wounded. 12,000. 12,000 humans who had given their lives. Morrison closed his eyes for a moment, thinking of all those people. They had been sons and daughters, fathers and mothers, brothers and sisters. Each one had a family somewhere who would grieve their loss. But if they had not fought, if they had surrendered, the losses would have been far greater. The Krell did not treat their conquered populations well. Surrender would have meant slavery at best, extinction at worst. The 12,000 had died so that billions could live free. Send a message to all human forces, Morrison said. The battle is over. We have defeated the Krell invasion. Stand down from combat stations and begin rescue operations. Anyone still alive out there, Krell or human, I want them found and brought in. And prepare a casualty list. Every person who died today deserves to be remembered. Throughout the solar system, human ships began the long process of recovery. Medical ships moved through the debris field, searching for survivors. Engineering teams started repairs on damaged vessels. Combat troops secured the surrendered Krell ships and took their crews into custody. On Earth, the news of victory spread quickly. Cities erupted in celebration. People hugged strangers on the street. Families who had been holding their breath for days finally allowed themselves to believe that they would survive. Humanity had faced its greatest test and passed, but not everyone was celebrating. In hospitals and medical stations, doctors worked to save the wounded. In military command centers, officers compiled lists of the dead. In homes across human space, families received the news that their loved ones would not be coming home. Kate Palmer sat at her communication station on the Defiant, exhausted. She had been working for 18 hours straight, coordinating communications throughout the battle. Now that it was over, the adrenaline was fading and the reality was setting in. They had won, but the cost had been terrible. "Lieutenant," Admiral Morrison said, approaching her station. "Good work today. Your coordination was excellent." Kate looked up at him with tired eyes. "Thank you, sir. But I keep thinking about all the people who didn't make it. Was it worth it?" Morrison considered the question carefully. Those people died defending their families and their freedom. The Krell would have killed billions if we had surrendered. So yes, it was worth it. But that doesn't make it any easier to accept the losses. He looked out at the stars through the bridge viewport. What we did today will echo across the galaxy. Every species out there will know that humanity cannot be conquered easily. Some will respect us for it. Others will fear us. Either way, they'll think twice before attacking us again. Those 12,000 people gave humanity a future. We need to make sure we honor that sacrifice. Kate nodded slowly. The Admiral was right. The battle was over, but its consequences were just beginning. Humanity had announced itself to the galaxy in the most dramatic way possible. From this day forward, no one would think of humans as weak or primitive. They had earned their place. The news traveled fast. Within days, every civilization in the galaxy knew what had happened in the Sol system. The Krell Empire, which had stood unchallenged for 3 centuries, had sent its greatest armada to conquer Earth. That armada had been destroyed. 300 ships reduced to debris and prisoners. An entire invasion fleet wiped out by a species that had been in space for less than a century. On trading stations and diplomatic outposts throughout the galaxy, representatives from dozens of species gathered to watch the battle recordings. The humans had transmitted everything, every moment of the fight. They wanted the galaxy to see what had happened. They wanted everyone to understand what it meant to threaten humanity. Elena Wright stood before the Galactic Council 3 weeks after the battle. She was Earth's ambassador, chosen to represent humanity to the wider galaxy. She was 40 years old, intelligent and diplomatic, but also firm when necessary. Today, she would speak for all of humanity. The council chamber was enormous, with representatives from hundreds of species arranged in a great circle. Some were humanoid. Others were completely alien, creatures of scale or fur or things humanity had no words for. All of them were watching Elena carefully. "Honored representatives," Elena began, her voice calm and clear. 3 weeks ago, the Krell Empire invaded human space. They came with 300 warships. They came to conquer our worlds and enslave our people. They believed we were weak because we are young. They believed we would surrender rather than fight. They were wrong. She paused, looking around the chamber. Some representatives nodded. Others remained still, their expressions unreadable. "Humanity does not seek conquest," Elena continued. "We came to the stars looking for knowledge, for trade, for friendship. We hope to find peaceful neighbors among the stars. But we also knew that the galaxy might hold dangers, so we prepared. We built defenses. We developed weapons. We trained our people for war. And when the Krell attacked, we showed them that humanity will not be conquered. The battle is over. The Krell fleet is destroyed. But let this be a message to every civilization in the galaxy. Humanity will defend itself with everything we have. We are not easy prey. We are not victims. We are humanity, and we have earned our place among the stars. The chamber erupted in discussion. Representatives spoke in dozens of languages, their translators working to keep up. Some species cheered humanity's victory, particularly those who had suffered under Krell aggression. Others looked worried, seeing humanity as a new threat to galactic stability. The balance of power had shifted, and everyone knew it. A representative from the Vex Collective, a species known for their peaceful nature, raised a tentacle to speak. Ambassador Wright, your victory is impressive, but it also raises concerns. Humanity has demonstrated tremendous military capability. How can we be certain that you will not become the next aggressive empire? Elena met the Vex representative's eyes. We cannot give you absolute certainty. No one can, but I can tell you that humanity's history has taught us the cost of war. We know what it means to fight. We know what it means to lose people we love. That is why we prefer peace. We will trade with any species that approaches us honestly. We will defend any ally that asks for our help. But we will not start wars of conquest. We have seen where that leads, and we want no part of it. Back in the Sol system, life slowly returned to normal. The damaged ships were being repaired or scrapped. The debris from the battle was being cleared. The wounded were recovering in hospitals, and the dead were being mourned. Lisa Grant stood at a memorial wall on Mars, one of many such walls being built throughout human space. The wall was made of polished black stone, and on it were engraved thousands of names. Each name represented a human who had died defending their civilization. Lisa's crewmates who had not made it to their escape pods were among them. "We did it," she whispered to the names. "We stopped them. You gave your lives, and because of that, billions more get to live free. I hope that means something. I hope you're at peace." Admiral Morrison joined her at the wall. He was out of uniform today, wearing civilian clothes. Even admirals needed time to mourn. "I knew most of these people," he said quietly. "Not personally, maybe, but I knew their names. I read their service records. I gave the orders that sent them into battle. That never gets easier," Lisa nodded. "Do you think it was worth it? All these lives?" "It had to be done," Morrison replied. "If we had surrendered, everyone on this wall would still be dead, just slower and in chains. At least they died fighting for something they believed in. That matters." They stood in silence for a while, two survivors among billions, paying their respects to those who had not survived. 3 months after the battle, Earth held a massive ceremony. Every human who had fought in the battle and could make the journey attended. Representatives from friendly alien species came as well, showing their respect for humanity's sacrifice. The ceremony was held at a new monument, visible from orbit, that bore the names of every human lost in the defense of their civilization. President Helen Carter stood before the crowd. She was the leader of Earth's unified government, a position that carried enormous responsibility. Today she spoke not just for Earth, but for every human in the solar system and beyond. "Today we honor those who stood between our civilization and destruction," she began. "We remember the courage of every pilot, soldier, engineer, and civilian who contributed to our survival. The Krell believed that our youth made us weak. They learned the truth, but at terrible cost to themselves." She gestured to the monument behind her. "Our species has always been defined by our ability to adapt and overcome. From the plains of Africa to the rings of Saturn, humanity has faced extinction time and again we have survived. We have thrived. This battle was just the latest challenge in our long history. The galaxy now knows what we have always known. Humanity cannot be conquered. We can be hurt. We can be challenged, but we cannot be broken. This is our promise to the stars. This is our declaration to any who would threaten us. We are here. We are strong. And we are only getting started." The crowd cheered, their voices carrying across the open space and beyond, broadcast to every human colony and ship in space. It was a moment of unity, a moment when every human felt connected to something larger than themselves. But humanity did not rest on its victory. "Admiral Morrison, Promoted to Supreme Commander of all Earth Defense Forces, oversaw a massive expansion of human military capabilities. New shipyards were built in orbit around every major colony. Research facilities dedicated to improving weapons and defenses operated constantly. Training academies for new officers and soldiers opened on Earth, Mars, and the outer colonies. The lesson had been clear. Peace required the ability to wage war. Humanity would never again be caught unprepared. Stephen Martinez, the captain who had destroyed the Krell flagship, now taught at Earth Defense Academy. His students were young men and women who had grown up knowing that the galaxy was dangerous. They studied the battle recordings, analyzing every move, every decision, every tactic. Remember this, Stephen told his students. The Krell assumed that inexperience meant incompetence. They paid for that assumption with their fleet. Never underestimate anyone, and never let anyone underestimate humanity. We have spent our entire existence overcoming impossible odds. That is what we do. That is who we are. Throughout the galaxy, the ripples from the battle continued to spread. The Krell Empire, shattered by the loss of their invasion fleet, began to crumble. Subject species demanded independence. Internal conflicts erupted. The empire that had stood for centuries was tearing itself apart, all because they had made the mistake of attacking humanity. Other species took note. Some approached humanity with trade offers and alliance proposals. Others kept their distance, wary of the new military power that had emerged. But all of them treated humanity with respect. The days of being dismissed as primitives were over. Rachel Torres, who had coordinated the Saturn defenses, now oversaw the construction of new defense networks around Earth's colonies. She worked with engineers and military planners to create layered defenses that would make any future attack prohibitively expensive. We got lucky, she told her team. The Krell underestimated us, and that gave us the advantage we needed. But the next enemy might not make that mistake. So we need to be ready for anything. We need to be so strong that no one even thinks about attacking us. Years passed. The battle became history, studied in schools and military academies. Children grew up hearing stories about the day humanity defeated the Krell invasion. Monuments stood on every human world, honoring those who had given their lives. But humanity never forgot the lessons learned. They maintained their military strength. They continued to innovate and improve their technology. They built alliances with friendly species and watched potential threats carefully. They had won their place among the stars, but they knew that place had to be defended constantly. The galaxy had learned something important that day. Humanity was not a species to be trifled with. They were survivors, fighters, innovators. They had climbed to the top of their world's food chain through intelligence and adaptability. Now they brought those same qualities to the wider galaxy. Some species saw humanity as a threat. 10 years after the battle, a young Krell scholar named Thexaval sat in the archives of his homeworld, studying everything he could find about the invasion of human space. He had been just a child when the fleet departed, too young to understand what was happening. Now, as an adult, he wanted to know the truth about what had destroyed his empire. The official Krell records called it a disaster, an unexpected defeat, bad luck and poor intelligence. But as Thexval dug deeper, reading through sensor logs and battle recordings, he began to understand something more profound. The Krell had not been unlucky. They had been outfought, outthought, and outmatched by a species they had completely misunderstood. He studied human history, learning about their development from primitive hunters to spacefaring civilization. What he found both fascinated and terrified him. Humanity had spent thousands of years in almost constant warfare. Every generation had known conflict. Every century had brought new weapons and new ways of killing. They had refined warfare into an art form, learning lessons in blood that most species never had to face. More importantly, humans had developed something rare in the galaxy. They combined tremendous capacity for violence with equally strong restraint. They could unleash terrible destruction when necessary, but they also knew when to stop. When the Krell fleet had been defeated, the humans could have pursued them. They could have followed the survivors to Krell space and attacked the homeworld, but they had not. They had made their point and stopped at their system's edge. Thexval compiled his research into a report. He called it the human paradox, understanding the species that defeated us. It became required reading in Krell military academies and was translated into dozens of galactic languages. Other species wanted to understand humanity too. In his conclusion, Thexval wrote words that would echo across the galaxy for generations. Humanity possesses the capacity for terrible violence, refined through countless generations of warfare. But they also possess restraint, choosing when to unleash their fury and when to show mercy. This combination makes them more dangerous than any purely aggressive species. They fight not from bloodlust but from necessity, and when they fight to win. The galaxy should note this carefully. Humanity sought no empire. They asked only to be left in peace. We denied them that peace. The consequences were devastating for us. Let this be a lesson to all species. Humanity can be your greatest ally or your most terrible enemy. The choice of which they become is entirely yours to make. Choose wisely. Meanwhile, humanity continued to grow and expand. New colonies were established on worlds throughout human space. Trade with friendly alien species flourished. Scientific research advanced rapidly, with humans and aliens sharing knowledge and technology. The galaxy was becoming a better place, in part because humanity had proven that aggression would not go unanswered. Admiral Morrison, now in his 70s, sat in his office on Earth. He had retired from active command 5 years ago, but he still served as an advisor to the defense forces. Today he was meeting with a young officer who reminded him of himself at that age. The officer's name was Daniel Carter, and he had just been promoted to captain of a new destroyer. He had come to seek Morrison's advice before taking his first command. "Sir," Daniel said, "I've studied the battle recordings 1,000 times. I've read every report, every analysis, but I still have questions. How did you know we could win? We were outnumbered. Their technology was more advanced. By all accounts, we should have lost." Morrison smiled slightly. "We won because we understood something the Krell didn't. Technology and numbers matter, but they're not everything. What matters more is adaptability, creativity, and the willingness to do whatever it takes to survive. Humanity has been doing that since we lived in caves and hunted with stone tools. The Krell had better shields and stronger ships, but we had something more important. We had the determination to win and the intelligence to figure out how." He leaned forward. "Captain, you're going to face situations where you're outmatched. Every commander does. When that happens, remember this. It's not about having the best equipment or the biggest ship. It's about using what you have in ways your enemy doesn't expect. It's about being willing to take risks. And it's about never, ever giving up. That's what makes humanity dangerous. That's what won us the battle." Daniel nodded slowly, absorbing the lesson. "And what about peace, sir? We've built all this military strength. How do we make sure we don't become the next aggressive empire?" "That's the right question to ask," Morrison replied. "Power without restraint leads to tyranny. We have to remember why we fight. We fight to protect, not to conquer. We fight to preserve freedom, not to take it away from others. As long as we remember that, as long as we use our strength only when necessary, we'll be fine. But the moment we forget, the moment we start thinking like the Krell did, we'll become the very thing we fought against." Elena Wright, now the senior human diplomat in the galaxy, spent her days working to build alliances and strengthen relationships. She had been humanity's voice for 10 years, and she had seen the galaxy's attitude toward humans change dramatically. Today, she was meeting with representatives from the Vex Collective, the peaceful species that had once worried about humanity becoming aggressive. They wanted to propose a mutual defense treaty. "Ambassador Wright," the Vex representative said, "when we first met, we were afraid of humanity. We saw your military strength and worried you might use it to conquer others. But over these past 10 years, you have proven yourselves. You have used your strength only to defend, never to attack. You have helped species that asked for protection. You have shared technology and knowledge freely. We would be honored to call humanity our allies." Elena smiled. "The honor would be ours. Humanity values peace above all things, but we also know that peace must sometimes be defended with force. Together we can build a safer galaxy for everyone." The treaty was signed, the first of many such agreements. Humanity was building a network of alliances across the galaxy, creating a federation of species dedicated to mutual defense and cooperation. The galaxy was becoming more stable, more peaceful, because humanity had proven that aggression would not succeed. On Mars, at the memorial wall where so many names were engraved, Lisa Grant stood with her grandson. The boy was 10 years old, born 5 years after the battle. He had never known war, had never felt the fear that his grandmother's generation had experienced. That was exactly what his grandmother had hoped for. "Grandma," the boy asked, "why did all these people have to die?" Lisa knelt down to his level. They died so that you could grow up free. The Krell wanted to make us slaves to take away our freedom and our future. These people said no. They fought back and they won. Because of them, you get to live in a peaceful galaxy. You get to dream and grow and become whoever you want to be. That's what they gave us. The boy looked at the names on the wall with new understanding. I want to be like them when I grow up. I want to protect people. Lisa smiled, though her eyes were wet. Then honor them by living well, by being kind and brave and strong, by building the future they fought to give us. That's the best way to remember them. Across human space, similar conversations were happening. The generation that had fought was teaching the next generation the lessons they had learned. War was terrible, but sometimes necessary. Peace was precious, but required constant vigilance. Strength was important, but must be tempered with wisdom and restraint. Humanity had learned these lessons the hard way, through blood and sacrifice. But they had learned them well. And now they passed that knowledge forward, ensuring that future generations would understand both the cost of war and the value of peace. The Krell Empire, once mighty and feared, had fractured into dozens of smaller states. Some remained aggressive, but most had learned from their defeat. They knew now that the galaxy had changed. Might no longer made right. Aggression would be met with resistance. The strong could no longer simply take what they wanted from the weak. Other aggressive species watched and learned the same lesson. A few tested humanity's resolve with small provocations. Each time they found that humanity's response was measured but firm. The humans did not overreact, but they also did not back down. They had drawn a line and they would defend it. Gradually, the galaxy became more peaceful. Not because everyone suddenly became peaceful by nature, but because everyone understood the consequences of aggression. Humanity had proven that even the strongest empire could be defeated if they underestimated their opponents. Years became decades. The battle that had changed the galaxy became history, then legend. New generations grew up knowing only peace, barely able to imagine the desperate struggle their grandparents had faced. The names on memorial walls became symbols rather than people, honored but increasingly distant. But humanity never forgot the lessons of that day. Every military academy taught the battle in detail, analyzing every decision and every tactic. Every diplomatic school studied how the battle had changed galactic politics. Every schoolchild learned about the sacrifice of those who had defended their civilization. The day humanity's Armada shattered the Krell invasion became more than just a historical event. It became a defining moment for the entire species.